So before I became a priest, before I was assigned to Loyal Academy, I'm allowed to say that 5 times a sermon, by the way, Loyal Academy. It's a great school over there at Loyal Academy. All right, sorry. I was in the Navy, had a military career, and one of the things I really liked about the Navy was every time they sent me to a new job, they made sure I was well trained for it. I always had a set of orders with a series of schools to go to. And when I went to my first department head job, okay, so if you're Army Air Force, this is kind of between company grade and field grade officer. It's the first time you're in charge of other officers in the Navy. So they sent me to department head school. And while I was at department head school, I had a very memorable briefing. The briefing was actually from a commanding officer, and this was 25 years ago. His unit had been hit pretty hard, and they'd lost a lot of material and had some killed in action too. And he basically explained to us everything that had gone wrong and, what had gone right too, and how we all new junior department heads could learn from what had happened. All right, good to go. Went off, did my first department head tour, and was getting out of the Navy somewhat after that. The Navy kind of didn't know what to do with me, nuclear engineer turned priest wannabe. And so they said, well, all right, we got a slot for you as an executive officer, so we're going to cut short your department head rides, we're going to send you right to the executive officer school, and then you're going to go back, and then you'll get out of the Navy. So I think, all right. So I went back to executive officer school. This is 3 years later, and I heard the same guy give the same talk about the same unit and the same situation, and it was a completely different talk. Now, this was odd, and I felt for the guy because he'd been doing the same thing for about 3 years now, and that's a hard thing to do, to spend your 3 years of your life explaining how you screwed up and guys got killed under you. So I got to take that with a grain of salt. But instead of being the, well, things were hard and we managed to make it through and here's what you can learn talk, this was the how I saved the ship talk. This was, I was at large and in charge at all times, and without me, things would have been really bad, and that's what you need to learn from this presentation. And the other officers I was with, the XOs and commanding officers to be, said, this is great. This is the kind of officer I need to be. This practiced, polished, in-charge guy. And I was the only guy in the room that had heard the 3-year-old version before, about the guy who was just kind of semi-crushed about what had happened to him. Now, of course, I kept my mouth shut about this. Because that's not what you want to do as the most junior officer in the room, is explain to a bunch of senior officers how they're all, well, screwed up and have come to the wrong conclusions. But when I was preparing to talk about the prodigal son, I realized we all heard the second version of the story. And I get it, this is Jesus, and he has a parable, and it's a really good one. It's about the most memorable one in all the Gospels. But imagine that there was a story behind this parable, and that we could go through each of these 3 characters. What would we learn from them? And I think that what we would learn is something additional about forgiveness and priorities and responsibility. Because behind this beautiful story and this wonderful teaching of the need for forgiveness and for us to see and accept the forgiveness of others, older son, there's something else. So let's look at the first part of this, at the prodigal son, the younger one. And I get it, he does well saying, well, I've sinned. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Okay, there's a little bit of wallowing in guilt. And then the line of, and I want you to treat me as one of your hired workers. I'm done that bad. And he practices it, and he goes back, and there's something missing. I get it. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. And then comes the, demand for employment. Hire me, treat me as one of your hired workers. I don't know that that's really the necessary or appropriate second step. I think we're missing something here, and that is a simple, can you forgive me? I don't really think it's the younger son's place to make a demand on his father for employment at this point. He's just cost the family farm half of its assets in a year. That's a bad year. So I get forgiveness, famous last words, but there's the need for forgiveness, but there's also the simple thing of asking for forgiveness, and that we just don't see in the younger son. And then we go to the older son. And just as we've all kind of sort of been the younger son, we've all kind of sort of been the older son and seen forgiveness given to others and thought, gosh, they're not worthy of that forgiveness, are they? They haven't done enough penitence. They haven't earned it. It's not to be earned perhaps, but okay. But yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. That really caused me pause, because here the family farm has just lost half of its assets. And the priorities here are not family or farm. And by the way, there's a lot of hired hands here that are depending on the farm to keep solvency. Instead, the priority is me and my friends and a young goat. And that doesn't compute with me either, because you would hope that the older son would be thinking first about the family and about the responsibilities of a family farm, and third about his current friend set and their parties and their goats. And it's just not there. And then finally, the father. And I get it. The father is a righteous wisdom figure. He does a great job forgiving his son. I mean, there is just forgiveness rolls off of him almost. It's a beautiful scene. And yet, a smart man does know how to get out of tough situations, but a wise man perhaps never gets into them in the first place. And there is a simple, I think, answer to a son coming up to you and saying, hey, Dad, I kind of sort of wish you were dead now so that I could have half of the family assets. Can you let me have them, please? I think that answer is no. There is something to be said for generosity, and there's something to be said for responsible generosity. And giving half of your assets, knowing that they will be squandered, is not responsible. You have a duty to the rest of the family and to the farm workers to not let this farm go under, and I don't see it there either. And so what's going on? Losing control of your family. How is good going to come out of this? A father can see a train wreck in process, and it doesn't help to throw coal on the fire in the engine and speed up the train as it's going towards its wreck. That's the time to apply the brakes and say, okay, let's talk about this, son. What are your plans after you get half of the family farm assets? All right. So we do again all know the beauty of this story, and all parables are built so that we put ourselves in the different positions of the father, in this case, the older son and the younger son, and we kind of see how we are a part of each of those characters. And we've heard that sermon before. I've given it 2 or 3 times in the past couple years. But I think that there is a story behind the story. And I think that when I look back on my 3 years at Loyola Academy, because by coincidence, this is my 3rd year. Okay, that's 4 times I've said it. And in my office there at that school, still 4, I got whiteboards set up, and I take notes and graphs. I'm a nuclear engineer, like I said, and I keep records. And I keep notes about the stories I've told to other people. And I can see in myself over the past 3 years how my stories have changed as well. I got notes how they are. If you keep a journal or a diary, or you have family or friends that are honest with you, you could probably go to them and say, hey, you remember that time way back, and what was that like for you? And you might get a different story than what you have. You might even get someone who's willing to say to you, 3 years ago, you said this was the story. And now as you give it, it's this. And there's something, neat, both are right, both are true. You might even say both versions even happened, but you're emphasizing different things. I don't think that the events changed. I think that your need to tell things differently changed. Your need to present yourself in a different way came about. And I think that if we look back on perhaps some of the small or even the big stories of our lives, we'll see how they changed in the last couple years, perhaps many years as well. So what does this mean for God, the world, and everything? Well, here we are in Lent, the time of penitence and the time of reflection. And we have a wonderful story and an okay sermon about it, but there's a story behind the story. And I think that there are stories behind the stories of our lives too. And here we are halfway through Lent, and we have a little bit of extra time. Maybe we got some time this morning, this afternoon, this evening, sometime this week, not just to be penitential about the things that we know, but to go back to our own stories and ask ourselves, or even some people that we trust to tell us the truth about ourselves, how has my story about myself changed? And what do I need to be penitential about there? Because it will reflect a different need that I have now in how I present myself. This Lent, we have a chance to be penitential, not just for the current stories of our lives, but for the stories behind the stories of our lives.
Thank you for participating in the digital liturgy today. The digital ministry touches the lives of many people, as does almost 80 other ministries here at OLPH. Grateful for the community that connects to OLPH through this digital forum. It's unbelievable how many people are able to access the liturgy and other events because of this ministry. Please consider supporting OLPH. All of your sacrifices help to sustain this parish and to keep moving us into the future. Thank you very much, and keep watching.